Be not a lender, nor a borrower be. Do not forget, stay out of debt. Think twice and take this good advice from me. Guard that old solvency. These famous words from Shakespeare's Hamlet, spoken by Polonius, is just rings in my ears quite frequently. I heard my mom say, be wise with your money, stay out of debt, all of these type of things. But evidently, I took heed to it and heed to it, but our government, for some strange reason, just has not. So, guys, welcome to the Liberty Show with Kevin Fortune, the King of Liberty. And tonight, we're going to be discussing that topic of debt and our deficit crisis, which truly is a crisis in the U.S. from many different perspectives. Why do we have this debt? Where did it come from? What are we spending on it? How does it affect our future? How does it affect our present? And what are we going to do about it? But first, guys, I just want to remind you guys to like us on Facebook, like us on Instagram, and make sure if you're watching us on YouTube that you hit that like button and also subscribe. Share us with your friends. Now, if you would like to be one of the sponsors or patrons of the Liberty Show, we have it affordable for everyone, only $5 a month. So go to patreon.com/The Liberty Show and be one of our monthly patrons. Also, we have some really, really exciting news. Guess what? We are now on Anchor. You can listen at The Liberty Show with Kevin Fortune on Anchor. You can listen at it on Apple iTunes. You can also listen at it on Spotify. We now are on more platforms. Please listen at us on these platforms and share the word. Now, let's get started tonight. What about the debt? What about the deficit? What about the debt crisis? Well, to give us our background information is my main man, Mr. Tim Smith from Atlanta, Georgia. Hey, Tim, you're on The Liberty Show.
Hello, everyone. I have bad news, but I also have good news. I have a solution for our problem. And our problem, of course, is our national debt. We need to take a deep breath, gird up our loins for this astronomical number of $22 trillion. The U.S. owes over $22 trillion.
Tim, did I hear you correctly, or are you misspeaking?
No, it's 22 trillion with a T, not a B, but it's $22 trillion. So that equates to somewhere in the neighborhood of $67,000 each individual owes in U.S. debt. Now that's the problem. I have a solution. The first solution is we need to use this time off that a lot of us have because of the coronavirus to start having more kids. And the reason why we need y'all to have more kids is because we need more individuals to help shoulder this silly, astronomical, criminally vulgar number of $22 trillion. So if you're in a committed relationship, please make more babies while you have some time so that we can shoulder this astronomical debt.
That's now y'all see why I pay him so much.
We need more babies. The second solution to our problem, we need to, and I'm starting this petition, I'm going to send a link, post it up on change.org. We need to free Bernie Madoff. Now, before you freak out, here's why we need to free Bernie Madoff. The man was a genius when it came to running a Ponzi scheme. If we're honest, our social welfare programs are a Ponzi scheme. Now, those who object and say, well, you're just being silly. It's a Ponzi scheme. And they love to point out, well, there's no one that's actually benefiting from this Ponzi scheme. Yes, politicians are benefiting from the Ponzi scheme because they lie, trick the voters by not giving them enough information to make considered choices. So we need to break out Bernie Madoff because this man is a special talent, has a special talent when it comes to running a Ponzi scheme. I think he could probably do a better job at running our Ponzi schemes that we have in place now than our current folks, the Department of Treasury. That guy He doesn't even know, he doesn't come close to Bernie Madoff. So that's my solution to our problem. We need to have more babies. Y'all in committed relationships, please have more kids. We need them. Secondly, we need to break Bernie Madoff out of prison. Solution, problem. Thank you.
Thank you, Tim. You've earned your Long Island iced tea for the month. I like those. I like the problem. I like the solution. That is funny. I don't know about making new babies, but I think we can at least practice. I think that's a good idea. Guys, that is a really good start. You know, a lot of times we don't want to face the ugly realities of our debt and the crisis and our deficit. My thing personally is I don't like debt, but if there's, you know, we obviously there's good debt and bad debt, but our debt is so ludicrous. It's my biggest concern, which we'll talk about later, hopefully, is where we're spending the debt. You know, if we were educating people, I wouldn't mind. Of course, I work with students, high school students, grade school, college. Half of them can't read or write. They don't even know who Martin Luther King is. They don't even, oh my goodness. They don't know who the first president of the United States was. So just pouring more money into a failed system is really, really crazy. But spending all this money, loaning it to other countries and helping economic development in other countries, it sounds good, it's wonderful. But we've got people starving and unemployed and uneducated right here at home. The biggest thing of all of these asinine wars, these fraudulent wars, these made-up wars, and the biggest thing is the bill we have for our mass incarceration system, mainly because of this fraudulent, fake, preposterous drug war that, you know, we're just monetizing, making money, profitizing off of people being incarcerated. So we're spending all this money when we could be doing it for something very vital, like getting tests for corona and helping people that are off work with that, but we don't have the money because we spend it on everything else. Well, you guys just didn't call in to hear me. Let's go to David down in Fort Lauderdale, Florida. David, how's my favorite Republican?
Real good. Can you hear me, Kevin?
Sure.
Yeah, okay. My biggest problem is that our government has an open checkbook and they just want to throw money and they never go for solutions. And once they assign the money, then you're on the dole year after year after year. And it's ludicrous the way they go around about solving problems.
Well, you know, it's really, that's a good point. How can you expect the people that created the problem to solve the problem? But we do, and we keep electing these same idiots that created the problem. We want them to solve the problem. If they're making money off of locking people, why would they want to solve that problem? If, you know, they're getting, I just don't understand it. Oh my goodness. Good point. Anything else, Dave?
Well, now that we've got a national emergency, yeah, we've got to step in and help. But that 22 trillion is quickly going to be 42 trillion in debt. So at a certain point, we're broke, and nobody wants to admit it.
Well, I agree there. And, you know, why do you think that is that people don't want to talk about it? The Republicans don't want to talk about it. The Democrats don't want to talk about it. Libertarians talk about it, but they do behind closed doors and amongst themselves. Why is it we don't want to talk about it?
Because we want to cut everybody else's deep pockets, but we don't want to cut our own. Our own
interesting.
source.
Interesting. Well, thank you, Dave. It's good to hear from you. Good to hear Republican perspective and good to hear an American perspective. Now let's go way up yonder to the wonderful state of New York. There's a cool guy out there. His name is Kevin. So if his name is Kevin, he's got to be cool. So Mr. Kevin Wilson in Rochester, New York. Kevin, you're on the Liberty Show.
Yeah, no, it's a great name, right? So why not? So I'm Kevin Wilson from Rochester, New York. I've been frustrated with the fact that the Democrats and the Republicans haven't been able to effectively deal with the debt. And we've actually accurately pointed out how much the national debt is. And we also pay something on the order of $380 billion a year in interest on that debt. And again, that's money that could be used for other things, either on, responding to the coronavirus or just kept in the American taxpayer pocket too. And unfortunately, now it's going to be a difficult time to address the national debt because people are worried, people are scared, people want investment and solutions to a national crisis. But the time to fix this problem was 10 years ago when there was enough political momentum to start talking about it. Unfortunately, that didn't happen in either the Republican Party, the Tea Party wave that swept through Congress and swept through the country. The party failed to do that. They cut taxes and then they left it at that. They didn't do the tougher job of cutting spending. And that's what we're going to need to talk about a lot more is what areas can we cut and kind of return that taxpayer money. Well, that money, I mean, it's not even taxpayer money taken out from us. It's just putting it out in debt. How can we get back to a responsible program of spending? We've gotten so far from that. Peeling it away one by one is going to be a difficult, tedious process, but someone needs to say, eat your vegetables, go and make it happen.
Well, can you give me what's some examples of things you think that we could cut or should be cut?
Yeah, sure. So I think that military spending should be cut. I think that we need to end foreign wars and foreign obligations, and we need to bring the troops home, and that's going to save money over time. I am moderately hopeful that we can start to peel away from the war in Afghanistan, which we've spent trillions of dollars on. And
is it still going on? I'm so lost.
Almost 20 years now, Kevin.
Oh my goodness.
I know, but there are some military personnel who are starting to come home, and hopefully President Trump sticks to that commitment to bring Americans home.
But we're still funding it. We're still
funding it. I mean, there's stories. If you read the Afghanistan papers, the whole big piece that the Washington Post put out a few months ago, they were just sending like crates of money over there, like millions and millions of dollars just getting lost in Afghanistan too. It's unfathomable, like how much money.
Well, there's millions of dollars getting lost in America too.
Hey, there sure are.
What they're sending to these schools, I want to know where it's going because I meet the teachers. The teachers can't read or write. They can't even speak. I asked them a question. I don't know what they're saying. So, and I'm like, what is going on here? And we're just sitting here taking it. Should we continue to take it, sir?
No, I don't think so. And again, I think that we need to fundamentally rethink how we approach education. Here, up here in Rochester, New York, our graduation rate is on average around 50%. And right now, the school district is $60 million in debt. $60 million. They're asking for a state bailout right now, but why on earth should New York State or, the federal government bail out school systems that are fundamentally ineffective, that are getting these types of results? So I think we need to rethink how we approach education. I think there's smarter ways to do it and ways that'll cost us less money. We spend, tens of thousands of dollars per year per student in at least this school district in New York State. And I know all y'all from around the country, and that might be a bit different, but here in New York State, it's very, very expensive, and we got to start thinking outside the box on that.
I totally agree with you there. But one point I do want to piggyback on, why should we send funds to a failed system? Why do we send money to a school district that hasn't handled the money well? Why do we send money to a state welfare system? Nothing against welfare, but if they're not handling it right, they're not helping the people, they're not really being effective. Why do we just keep sending money to failed systems? That is my biggest problem. It's not that, we shouldn't help people, so don't put that lie out and start making the comments. But why should we continue to do that, Kev?
The momentum, honestly. Like, a lot of it's just that people can't think outside the box. It's, there's jobs at stake. If we cut funding to, the school district in my area, there are many people who, are afraid that they're going to lose their jobs. In our welfare systems, we have systems where there's a lot of incentive to stay on that. We don't want to leave people out in the cold. We don't want to leave people hurt and unable to feed their families. But, we create a lot of incentives for people to stay inside of those systems. And it ends up being ineffective in trapping people in poverty rather than lifting people up and giving them the temporary assistance they need to be out into the world and be successful.
Well, I agree with you. And that is my biggest pet peeve. That's how I really got into this liberty movement. I have no problem with helping people. Don't tell my libertarian friends. But I have no problem with welfare. It's just that it's not working. If you go downtown Atlanta, there's like thousands and thousands and thousands of homeless people. We're sending all this funding to these homeless shelters, and the directors are making $150,000 a year, and they have new $3,000 computers and all of this kind of stuff. And they're going to national conferences to talk about the problem in San Francisco at $300 night hotels. But the people that really need it is not getting to them. And that is oh my goodness. It's not frustrating. It's really angering me.
No, it's incredibly upsetting too, and a lot of people don't see any way to, again, think outside the box and think like, how is government on the federal, state, and local level kind of creating barriers for people to be successful, and they only see government as the only avenue for solving these problems. Like they can't think, all right, how do we create the incentives or remove the barriers to create nonprofit organizations or community groups to be able to address these issues with the people on the ground who have knowledge of the situation.
Well, I agree with you there that we should begin to have more private or partnerships or subcontract to private companies. I know in New York City, the housing authority now is through private companies. And they're starting to be quite, I'd use the word successful loosely, but compared to what the government is doing, but the government wants to run everything and they're like horrible at running everything.
Yeah.
So that's something. But thanks, Kev. Stay on there. We might come back to you. Let's go to one of our regulars, Mr. Damon Kennedy, Stockbridge, Georgia. Damon, what do you have to say about our debt crisis?
Well, I wish I had gone before Kevin, because you kind of stole my thunder in that the military spending is definitely a big line item that kills our budget. Because if you look at the military and then the quote unquote entitlements, which are Medicare, Medicaid, Social Security, those make up basically 3/4 of the U.S. of the federal budget. So essentially, to look at it another way, if you cut out everything that we know as government, with the exception of those the military, Medicare, Medicaid, Social Security, you still wouldn't even come close to trying to balance the budget. So then the problem is when we have the two-party paradigm, people get caught up in their feelings and they don't have the ability to think in a rational and nuanced way. And what I mean by that is the second you talk about cutting anything from the military, you've got a lot of people generally on the right who try to, speak in hyperbole and say, well, if you cut a penny from the military budget, next thing you know, we're going to have, our soldiers walking around with water guns. We're going to get invaded by Guatemala or something, but when you look at it, we spend more on our military than the next 8 countries combined. So there's got to be something that we can cut. And when we say, what can we cut? Well, we can start off with some of the fighter jets that can't even fly in the rain. I believe it's F-35. I don't know the exact model. I think it's F-35, but it can't even fly in the rain. So for the hundreds of millions of dollars it costs to make just one plane, it can't even fly it's got to be perfect conditions for it to fly. That's ridiculous. And then furthermore, kind of as Kevin mentioned about the homeless in San Francisco, you can use any population center in America. There's a problem with the homeless. Atlanta. I just came back from Las Vegas with my wife recently. Any major city has a big homeless problem. And part of the problem with government is that the profit motive or the incentive is not there. In the private sector, what happens is you've got a return on investment. If you spend money on a certain line item or certain anything, if it's not making a return on the investment, we either cut back on the investment or we just cut it down altogether and just move on to something else. The way government works with the baseline budgeting, every year they get more money to do whatever they're supposed to be doing than they did the previous year. So whenever we have, these debates about the budget shutdown, government shutdowns, they always talk about cutting. Well, if you're getting 10% more next year than you were the previous year, and you're only going to increase it by 5%, only in the bizarre world of government is that considered a cut. You're still getting more money next year than you were the previous year. But there's never any metrics to say, okay, well, what are we doing? Are we meeting our goal? Yes or no? And more than likely, when it comes to government, the answer is no, but it's always the solution. The way some people make it is, let's keep throwing more money at it. Doesn't matter if we haven't been successful. Let's keep throwing more money. And that's
actually, I think, Damon, they are meeting the goal, because you alluded to something. The military industrial complex, the penitentiary industrial complex. It's just money. It's let's fund money. Let's put more money. I call it crony capitalism. And you brought out something that we want to discuss it a little more. And that is that if you get to real conservatives or people on the right, oh my God, we need to cut food stamps, but don't cut military. Don't cut, we give a lot of grants and welfare to corporations. Let's give money to billionaires on Wall Street, but don't help a poor single mom.
And it literally just happened too. I mean, we can just talk about, don't have to go back 20 years. It literally just happened where the market got $1.5 trillion in liquidity into the financial markets. Now, we could make the argument that, okay, the stock market was tanking, which, well, we lived this in 2008, 2009. The market's tanked, yes, but it's a hypothetical. Would the money not have been better off being spent, given to actual individual people? Because you know at that point, it's going to go back into the markets anyway, right? Because if people need to live, right, people need to, pay their rent. They need to pay for, food, shelter, clothing, whatever. It's going to go back into the markets. So, again, there are a lot of times on the conservative side, there's trash that can be talked about both sides. On the left, they don't really care. They'll spend whatever. They don't care about, metrics or anything like that. But on the right, they always want to, penny pinch when it comes to helping out the quote unquote little guy. But when it comes to giving money to the large corporations, it's like, hey, spend whatever. They don't care. And so that's got to stop.
Wow. Thank you, Damon. Very good as usual. I want to, before we get to our main guest for tonight, I want to go back to Tim. Mr. Smith, you didn't go to Washington, I hope. And I want you to comment about the penitentiary industrial complex. Let's talk about all of this mass incarceration and how much we're spending and wasting on this fraudulent, fake drug world. Tim, that's an area that I know you've studied and that you're very involved in as an activist. Will you comment on that, please?
Sure. So here's the interesting thing. If we look at the prison industrial complex, I like to look at it by a state breakdown. So I'm familiar with the Southeast. Let's look at the state of Georgia. And it's not just the state of Georgia. So I'm not singling out the state of Georgia. This is a situation that transpires throughout the United States. If you look at how governments raise capital, one of the ways they raise capital is by arresting people. And cops, not only are cops incentivized by arresting folks, so we've spoken about this before. If you look at the city of Atlanta, when you get arrested here in the city of Atlanta, part of the fees and fines that you pay go to the police retirement fund. Yes. So cops literally have an incentive to arrest you. Not only does a portion of your fees and fines go to the police, but also it goes to the cities. So the city governments and the municipalities make income up to, some estimates are between 30, I've seen up to 37% of their income is derived from getting arrested. So when we look at the penitentiary system here in the States, as we like to say, the prison industrial complex here in the United States, we see that one of the ways government supplements its income is by arresting folks. And when they arrest folks, what they're basically creating is free labor. And that's the problem that we have when it comes to our budgets, whether we're talking at the federal level or at the city level, is how do we fund this big behemoth of a thing that we have going? And the problem with this, of course, is that it's just as impossible. If you look at the numbers as Damon and others have spoken about, it's impossible. But yet the government ignores this and looks up other ways to create income avenues, because what happens if we're just honest and we state that, listen, this is a failing ship and we either need to blow it up or repair it? When that happens, when folks have to actually think about this situation, when they have to think about how we spend our money, and here's a big thing that no one has yet to bring up, and perhaps I'm sure we will. I agree that we should cut when it comes to military. That's, of course, military. But what about Social Security, right? Social Security is a bill of goods that's been sold to previous generations. And the way it operates is that the current generation pays for the previous generation. So I'm a millennial. Why the hell do I need to pay? And why should I be on a stick for paying for baby boomers? They got screwed paying for their parents. But we don't actually want to have that conversation, because if we have that conversation, then the question is, well, how can you be so evil that you don't want to pay for the sick and the elderly? Well, of course, we know as liberty-leaning individuals that we believe the free markets will step in. And we see this happening with, what's the guy, Mark Cuban, who's furloughing the workers, the hourly workers, the wage workers at the arena. He's paying for their salary. So,
well, I agree with you. There are a lot of conversations we do not want to have, and that is so one reason we love the Liberty Show, where people can speak up. But also, Tillman, as far as this drug war, you know, we are arresting people for marijuana, cannabis. That's a plant. What are we going to do next? Outlaw collard greens? I mean, get real. And then we're locking them up. Then we have to feed them, clothe them, pay somebody to take care of them, give them medical stuff. All of this humongous burden on society, all in the name of something that is not, that could be a medicinal. We have proven evidence it could be medicinal. So can you comment on that before you go?
So even if it isn't medicinal, for instance, crack is not a medicinal drug.
Well,
We can't make that. Crack is not. Powder cocaine isn't either. But if we look at the history and up to Obama's presidency, so starting with Reagan through until Obama becomes president, he changes the law. If we look at the reaction to society, and that's what it is. If we're being honest, the criminal justice system, or as I like to say, the criminal unjust system, it's a reflection of society's thoughts, feelings, and beliefs. So if we look at crack cocaine gets you high just as powder cocaine does. But the society was at a place where, hey, Black folks are the ones using crack. And because we're so scared of Black folks, because, you know, these Black people are just evil. And that's, if we're honest, that's where society was. Black folks, these Black crackheads are evil, so we need to lock them up and throw away the key. And this was an argument that we heard on both sides of the aisle. Let's not forget Hillary Clinton. Well, you know, let's lock them up, and, you know, maybe we'll get to a point where we can, you know, straighten them out. But really, who cares about that? So this isn't a Republican nor a Democrat issue. This was on both sides of the aisle. Fast forward now. Society's idea is, or feelings, thoughts, and ideas is that, hey, marijuana isn't an issue. So we should be free to smoke our pot and grow our weed. My point of view is, if I'm not harming anyone, the government should not have a say in what it is that I do to my body or with another consenting adult. So that's my position when it comes to the war on drugs. It was just another way for the government to create revenue streams, and the government created revenue streams by free labor. We've spoken about this before. If municipalities can't afford, in most cases, to pay hourly workers to clean up, you know, here in the city of Atlanta, we have, like every other city, issue with people littering. So the city can't actually afford to pay people, you know, custodians, if you will, to clean up. So they arrest people, and what do? They send them out on the streets to clean up, and it's quote unquote free labor. It's exactly free labor. So that's what I see when it comes to the prison industrial complex and to where we are now with weed. It's just society's thoughts, feelings, and ideas towards marijuana has changed. So, hey, let's all smoke a blunt. Bigger issue, again, is the control that one person believes that they have over the other. And that's where we get a lot of our issues when it comes to the national budget. It's one individual who gets his friends and buddies and says, hey, I think we should go blow up these brown people. And that's what happens because, hey, they've got enough folks to back them with a vote on let's blow up these brown people because these brown people, you know, offended us. And I don't want to get into the whole 9/11 thing, but 9/11 is a great example. Why are we fighting wars over one incident, if we're honest?
Well, we know why, so that we can make more money, pay more money, but whatever the reason is, it's debt, debt, and more debt. Well, thank you, Tim, for your insight as normal. Matter of fact, I think you'll get 2 Long Islands next month. You did pretty good this month. Hey, guys, I just want to remind you, you're listening to The Liberty Show with Kevin Fortune. Remember to like us on Facebook and like us on Instagram. Also, if you're watching us on YouTube, do me a favor right now. Hit that like button. Also, make sure you subscribe so you don't miss any episodes. But I want to hear from you. What issues do you think the government should be spending more money on or are not spending enough money on? Please leave a comment down in the comments section. Also, just a reminder, we are now on Anchor, we're on Spotify, we're on Apple Podcasts. So make sure you listen at us on those platforms also. Now we're going to go to a very special guest, a good friend of mine, a really smart guy. He's a lawyer, he's a CPA, he's an activist, he is a man of liberty. So we're going to go to Mr. Alan Buckley down in Atlanta, Georgia. So Alan, welcome to the Liberty Show.
Oh, thanks, Kevin. Just as an update, the total national debt now is up to about 23.5 trillion, and the public debt is about 18 trillion. And the annual revenue for the federal government has never exceeded 3.5 trillion. So, and last year we spent 4.5 trillion in a time of extreme prosperity. So even in a time of extreme prosperity, we couldn't balance the budget. So current times are different than past times. If you look back around the turn of the century, we had tremendous prosperity, but we had balanced budgets for several years there. Ran surpluses, actually. But nowadays, everything is simply about living for today, and no one seems to really care about tomorrow. And as long as the media and the two major parties don't care, debt is just going to continue to grow and grow and grow until it doesn't. And I have on my website, I got involved in politics in 2003. I'm 59. I'm not that old, but just because the Iraq War put me over the edge, I knew a lot of innocent people would die. It would make our terrorism problems worse and our financial problems worse. And I had the good fortune in 2004 of being able to have a one-on-one lunch with Dave Walker, who was then the head of the GAO. And Dave Walker was the only person in the country who was setting off the alarm bells about the national debt. And he did a great service to the country in doing so. And just so you know, in 2007, okay, when the national debt was less than 9 trillion, again, now it's 23.5, the GAO said GAO's current long-term simulations continue to show ever larger deficits, resulting in a federal debt burden that ultimately spirals out of control. It sounds like I have that memorized, because I do. I use that quote a lot. I talk to people at the GAO, and I called the guy after they came out with that pronouncement. I said, how did you come to this conclusion that no matter what we do, our debts are going to spiral out of control? He said, we put a lot of smart people on the project. We did all sorts of analysis, and the same conclusion was always reached. The debts are going to spiral out of control, and we're seeing what's happening now. And on my website, I have an article that I took a long time writing that's called The National Debt's Impacts on Ordinary Americans, and you're all welcome to look at it. And I put a lot of thought into the situation over 17 years. I also have a lot of materials in there that if they were implemented, would solve the problems, stabilize the debt.
Alan, tell us what is that website, real quick.
It's buckleyforsenate.org, BUCKLEYFOR Senate.org, and including, the main thing I have on there is a tax system that's much simpler. I'm an attorney and a CPA, so I do a lot of tax work, and I've done that for since 1985. I've done a lot of tax work when I got out of law school. So I know how complex the system is. I know how it's a drag on businesses, mainly small to mid-sized businesses. And, a lot of the tax rules are one size fits all. And the problem is what's easy for Coca-Cola and for Home Depot is not easy for Joe's Hardware. So anyways, I have a very simple tax system on there that uses algebra, and it forces balanced budgets. And every year the U.S. is not in a recession or worse, you force a balanced budget, and you make federal politicians do what state and local politicians do, and that is balance the budget every year. So, and I have solutions for Social Security and Medicare that involve sacrifice. The bottom line is you got to cut entitlement some to make the numbers work. And like for Social Security and Medicare, I drafted a bill last year called the Financial Sanity Act that I sent to David Perdue twice. Never received. He's our U.S. Senator here, one of our U.S. senators. Never received a response. I sent it to the guy in Michigan who was Republican, who was very libertarian leaning. I'm trying to think of his name right now, congressman, and never received a response. But anyways, what it gradually does is moves the retirement age for Medicare and Social Security to 70 from 67 for Social Security. Medicare is 65, but it gradually moves them to 70 and then adjusts the retirement age every decade for changes in life expectancy. And it also incentivizes people to control costs on healthcare costs by disallowing tax subsidies for any health insurance that's not high deductible health insurance, and tweaks the definition of what qualifies. But in any event, I have solutions on there for basically all the problems: cutting entitlements, get out of the Middle East as far as the military, cut discretionary spending by 15%. I do litigation against the federal government, the Treasury Department, and the money that you see wasted is sickening. It's grotesque. And what happens in a lot of these agencies is they have a mission, like the IRS's mission is to collect taxes. Well, the audit rate's at a 40-year low. And so what they do in a lot of these agencies is they know what their assigned mission is, but they don't like it, and they want to do something different. And so they just go off and do whatever they want. And unless they're sued, and I'm in a lawsuit that's basically challenging some of the stuff they've done, they get away with it. And so, I work with the Institute for Justice up in D.C. A lot of these agencies are way off track. The IRS has got people doing background checks on people to get information, to get dirt on people that they can't do anything with. Because just so you know, anybody can prepare tax returns unless a federal court issues an order saying, you did X, Y, and Z, and therefore you are not allowed. And there's a very small group of people in this country who fall in that category because it's a major ordeal to take somebody to federal court. But the IRS wants to regulate the industry, and it wants to prohibit certain people that it doesn't like from being able to prepare tax returns. Now, going to your point about, the criminal justice system, they've decided they don't think anyone in prison for any reason should be allowed to prepare a tax return. Well, that would be fine if that's what the law was, but that's not what the law is. The law is that someone can be prohibited from preparing tax returns only if they're taken to court and a federal judge says you can't prepare a tax return. So you could have someone in prison for pot possession or whatever, a felony charge or lesser, and the IRS says you can't prepare tax returns. Well, they don't have the right to do that. But my point is, these agencies, a lot of them are just charting their own courses, doing whatever they feel like doing. And unless you take them to court and win, and the problem is a lot of the judges favor the federal government, particularly when it's a large money matter, like we're trying to sue them for $270 million. And the government's broke, and the government's going to try to get to a judge who's pro-government. There's a lot of pro-government judges, just so you know. So anyways, there are solutions to these problems, but they involve sacrifice. But I've spent years coming up with these solutions, and I welcome everybody to look at them on my website, because I know they work, but again, they do involve sacrifice. So.
Well, thank you. I was really, you brought out a lot of great, fascinating points. I was laughing and chuckling because did you actually expect some of those congressmen to respond back to you? Once again, why is it that we want the people that created the problem to solve the problem? When are we going to wake up and rise up and begin to challenge some of these? These people are just, I don't know. They created the problem. They definitely don't want to solve it because there's benefits to the problem. But I was thinking of that, Alan, because you sound like a really smart guy, and I know you are. But so many of these people that are making these decisions for us are not. You've got people, no disrespect, they majored in basket weaving in college, and they're flower designers, but they're making decisions about national debt and security and medicines and stuff, and they have no clue. So we need to really start electing some people like Alan and Kevin and others that are running for office that have some clue to what's going on. So I want to ask you, Alan, so what do you think, you said there's so much atrocities in our spending and wasteful spending. What are some of those atrocities, some of the biggest things we that our government wastes money spending on?
Well, I gave you an example of the IRS. A lot of these agencies go off on tangents and decide they don't like what their mission is. The IRS's mission is to audit people, collect revenue. They don't want to do that. They want to do their own thing. And, like in the military, we know about all the waste that goes on there. And we don't need to be involved in the Middle East that's just a continuous fight. And it's like going into a poker game. If do you want to come in and sit down and play, you're going to get bloodied. But if you enjoy that, have at it. But there's nothing in it in terms of for the U.S. and the Middle East now. It used to be we needed it for oil and to protect Israel. Well, Israel's doing fine on its own. Its only real huge enemy over there is Iran, and Iran is the enemy of so many countries over there and elsewhere. And as far as oil, we're a net exporter of oil. So I've got a great article on my website that I didn't create, but I pulled from the Wall Street Journal that says why it's time to leave the Middle East. Let me say this, David Perdue ran, if you follow it in Georgia, on solving the financial problems. He was the big CEO of Dollar General, and that's all he ran on back in 2014. And if you look at his voting record since he's gotten in there, he's done 180-degree opposite. He's on the Trump train of tax cuts and spending increases, and that all works till it no longer works. And on my website, I have what I think the odds are of various things happening, including I wrote this stuff last year. I said that we could very easily have a recession followed by a pandemic during the recession. Well, and again, this was all I wrote this last year, and that could cause a debt crisis earlier than it ordinarily would happen. Well, now we've got a pandemic that's going to probably cause a recession, so I just had the order wrong. But in any event, we could have a debt crisis as early as this year. And what that looks like, nobody really knows. But there's going to be a huge amount of money spent. I would be in shock if it was limited to this $58.3 billion that they're talking about now on this matter. And, protecting people from pandemics is a legitimate government role. The problem is, as some of the other guys have pointed out, we should have a lot less debt right now so that taking on a huge burden won't be a big problem. But the problem is we're so far in debt that we could trip into this debt crisis and have a panic and the markets go down, and then people stop spending if they're going to stop spending now anyways. And then they can't come back up because, you got a lot of, day by day, you got more and more people going into retirement, and they've got these X amount of dollars. And if they see that, cut back from $1 million down to 700,000, well, guess what? That Winnebago is going to go on hold. It's not going to happen. And that just trickles through the economy. So, the bottom line is there's an article I also put on my website in the campaign summary where a guy says, the guy is an expert on pandemics, and they ask him, are you really worried? This is the big one. Let me give you this quote. It's a guy named, his name is, here's his quote. He says, "I'm not hiding in my bunker right now," he said. "We're going to get hit by a much bigger one sometime in the next 10 years. Okay, this is a guy named David Finoff, and he's talking about his name is Dasek, D-A-S-Z-A-K. Anyways, but he's talking about a pandemic. So what I'm saying is, even if we get through this thing and we don't have a debt crisis now, we're looking at a really, really dangerous situation. What they're going to try to do, let me just tell you, I'm certain of this, virtually certain. They're going to try to take all the long-term debt. And while these interest rates are really low, and if you look on my website, I've got a history of the Fed rate going low, and it's just going low to protect the Treasury note rates. Because there's a guy named Huther, who I cite on my quote on my website, who basically says, if a democracy starts spending too much of its money on interest, it loses. I'll give you the exact quote. Michael Huther, he was with Stanford in 2007. The government loses its democratic legitimacy if it starts paying a too high share of its tax income on interest. That is going to dominate the Fed and finances in general for the indefinite future. That's why Fed rates are peanuts. It has very little to do with the economy. It's because the government is suffocating in debt. And Treasury rates typically follow the Fed rate. So if they take the Fed rates down to peanuts, Treasury rates go down, and they can handle the debt. And quantitative easing is creating money, buying the debt, and they want to buy the higher interest rate debt because the interest then, instead of going out to the public, goes to the Fed. And the Fed keeps a little bit of it and sends it back to the Treasury. And your interest expense that shows up on the net income statement of the federal government is the net of the amount that was actually paid out. So in other words, the money that goes to the Fed is not treated as interest expense of the federal government, going back to Huther's quote that I just read.
Interesting. Well, I tell you, this debt stuff gets a lot deeper than I thought. Guys, does anyone else have any final comments? Anyone else? Push a little finger button to make it go up or send in a comment. Anyone want to make a comment?
I'll say a few things if that's all right.
Go ahead.
Yeah, so I think we've covered a lot of important ground for identifying some of the major areas of government spending that are some of the worst culprits and the most wasteful and taking up the most of the resources here. And I just want to contribute a couple specific examples. I was doing some research the other day about the military budget and some of the equipment they have. And so I found the numbers that the military budget for 2020, we have $738 billion allocated there, which is just an incredible amount. And I mean, what that called is defense spending. And yet here in this pandemic situation we're finding ourselves in, where's the spending for medical defense against a situation like this? Certainly nowhere near that magnitude. An interesting fact I found was that the B-2 Spirit bomber plane used by the Air Force costs on average $2.1 billion to produce. And with that same amount of money, we would be able to construct and furnish 2 500-bed hospitals and still have $500 million left over in change. So I think something really important to keep in mind here is that this spending, even though these numbers might be really high in a lot of cases for policies we do have or proposed policies, we really need to look at how they are investments or not, or how effectively they are. And so for things that actually do allow people to improve their lives and become more financially independent and accumulate wealth to where they can create businesses and participate more fully in a market, a policy that has that kind of outcome, even if it has a large price tag, could very well pay for itself and even then contribute to easing this debt burden. So thinking creatively about how the outcomes of different policies can shape this, and not only looking at price tags, I think is really important. And this is a situation where I personally think that as much as we can eliminate bureaucracy and have a very simple, liberty positive type of policy, such as a universal basic income, could be really beneficial, more so than trying to get a lot of particular social programs that could have a lot of complications, such as free college or various healthcare proposals, like just getting the money into people's hands so they can have more autonomy, have more purchasing power, and hopefully participate more fully and effectively in our market society could be very, very effective.
And guys, that was Jared from, where are you from, Jared?
Wisconsin.
Jared from Wisconsin. Interesting points. Anyone else? Does anyone else have a final comment?
Kevin, this is Alan again. Just want to say, we have about 800 foreign military bases. The rest of the world combined, the last time I checked, had about 60. So, I mean, that's clearly an area where we can, cut a lot of expenses on the military side and have a lot less enemies. Because let's put it this way: if someone had a base down the street from me and they were from a foreign country, I'd have a hard time not attacking it, to be honest with you. So, one other problem that really makes things difficult is most of the people in the media are not savvy at financial issues. And
amen, brother.
And so that's a lot of the problem. I mean, they went into journalism for a reason, and
They're
So,
Hollywood. They're Hollywood. They're actors.
well, and you can't get them excited about this stuff because they don't get it, and it's not their fault. I mean, there's a lot of stuff in life I don't get, but they don't get this stuff, and this stuff is going to be our greatest problem. But people just don't realize it because it hasn't hit the fan yet. Because the Fed's been able to get away with these peanuts interest rates and quantitative easing, but at some point in the near future, that game is going to come to an end, and that's when it gets really ugly. So, and this next pandemic this guy's talking about, he says is less than 10 years away. We should stop running all these debts now. We should actually be either saving money or cutting down on the debt so that, at least getting it to diminish as a percentage of GDP. So when that next big one hits, we can actually stomach it. Because right now, if this, coronavirus turns into something really, really major, and the debt, goes up by 10 trillion, we're going to have a debt crisis, and it's going to be ugly because you're not going to be able to bail anybody out cheaply, and it's going to be the end of the world as we know it because we're not set up for something like that. Our government is not. So.
Well, that's a great point to end on. Just we're going to be doing a podcast real soon, in a couple of weeks actually, about just the coronavirus and the government's handling of it. So that's just awesome. It just blows my mind that we see it and everyone sees it, but no one wants to deal with it. No one wants to talk about it. No one wants to raise up about it. But lastly, is there any final comments? Kevin Wilson, let's hear a final comment from you.
Yeah, sure. I mean, lots of great points in here, and it's. I worry it's going to get ugly too. Again, as we when we start to face the next crisis, the time to fix this would have been when the economy was growing and we had the ability to be able to balance the budget effectively. And unfortunately, politicians did take it seriously. And that's part of the reason why I joined the Libertarian Party, is because I felt like the Libertarian Party is the only one who was taking this issue seriously. But while I do have a second, I am going to plug myself to I do host another show, Radio Free New York. Kevin's been a guest on it before, so we had a great discussion on. Well, who do we have a discussion on? We had a great discussion on civil rights in that episode, but yeah. So, but again, back to that issue, it's I think it's going to be one of the biggest issues of our time, and I really wish we had solved this problem when there's a political momentum to do so a decade ago. And
Kev, let me ask, why aren't politicians talking about it? Why are they're talking about global warming? They're talking about going to the moon, and they're talking about the fish, but nobody's talking about the debt crisis.
Well, it's a tough problem to solve. No one wants to be the bad guy to say, like, hey, we're going to cut this program, which means, cutting jobs sometimes, or we're going to raise taxes, which, ain't a great way to solve the problem either. We're going to, do something that's going to be unpopular. I mean, it is politically unpopular to cut the debt. And I'd love to hear someone correct me on that, but I think people like the idea of cutting the debt, but they don't want to actually do it.
Well, a lot of the problem is 90% of seniors vote, and the major components of spending are still Social Security and Medicare. So unless you cut, you're not going to get anything done. And none of the major politicians want to do anything except keep the status quo or expand it. Like Bernie Sanders is running a commercial now about, Biden wanted to cut spending, and he's saying, I want to increase Social Security. Well, that's the last thing we need right now. So.
No, we don't. I mean, we gotta find a way to fix that. It's gonna collapse eventually. I'm young. I'm not even 30 yet. I gotta, I'm not expecting Social Security. So how are we gonna fix this problem by the time I'm ready to retire? Can I have my own account? Can I have my own money back? Or is it just should we just?
If I were you, I wouldn't count on Social Security to pay my bills, Kevin.
Oh, I ain't. No, that ain't gonna happen.
Well, guys, go ahead.
I was at back in 2008, I think it was, 2004, I was at a Libertarian Party presidential debate, and someone raised the issue to these contestants, what are we going to do about Social Security? Because, I was running as a Libertarian, and now I'm independent because the Libertarians are too far gone for me, and I try to change them and become more moderate. But anyways, the question was, what would you do about Social Security? And the one guy's answer, I don't remember his name, was, what would you do to all the people who paid into it? I'd give them their money back. And there was a huge, round of applause. But people have to realize there's no money to give. There's nothing there. This is just working.
That is a good point. And
There's
guys,
nothing.
that's what, like now I'm looking at everybody with the pandemic, the corona is very real. Oh, we need to help people. All these people are unemployed. Where I work part-time, it's shut down. The stock markets are closing. People can't pay their bills. But the money, there's no money. So now they've got to borrow more money to send money to people. It's not there. And that's something you can't get people. Oh, we've got plenty of money. We're the richest nation on earth. It is such a facade. It's so fake. It's such a big lie. Well, guys, thank you for another wonderful show. Reminder, like us on Facebook, like us on Instagram, watch us on YouTube, hit that like button. Stop right now before you do anything. Hit the like button. Also subscribe, share us with your friends. Visit some of the guests. Visit Alan Buckley's website, Radio Free New York with Kevin Wilson. And also make sure you visit us on YouTube. Now we're on Anchor, we're on Spotify, we're on Apple Cast. The Liberty Show with Kevin Fortune. We'll see you next time. But last but not least, be a sponsor of us. Help us keep this show on the air and even make it visual. We're in the process of raising capital for filming equipment. So go to patreon.com/The Liberty Show and be one of our sponsors to help bring liberty, put liberty into action across this nation. Once again, have a great day. See you next time on The Liberty Show with Kevin Fortune.